Hi all of you awesome scuba divers, welcome to Scuba Diver Magazine, your favourite place for the latest scuba diving news and gear reviews. This video is sponsored by Master Liverboards, who run liverboards all around the globe from the Galapagos to Truck Lagoon. So there's one technique that I learned after my qualifying courses, and even after becoming an instructor, I noticed that it wasn't in any of the curriculum. It's just kind of something that you learn from other divers, only it's a really useful diagnostic tool that all divers should do before a dive to check their dive equipment is working properly. So the proper name for this would be a positive pressure check. Now, rebreather divers should be very familiar with positive and negative pressure checks to check for leaks in their rebreather loop, and you run these tests before every single dive, or at least every time you disassemble and reassemble your equipment, but it's a great test for open circuit divers to run before each dive as well. So your positive pressure check is a great way to check for small leaks in your regulator. Big leaks tend to be quite obvious on open circuit. If there's an extruded O-ring or something has worked its way loose, then there's typically a lot of noise and some gas blowing off somewhere from your regulator, and sometimes people point and laugh. But a slow or a small leak can be quite hard to notice unless you're literally in the water and you can see a stream of bubbles, but by that point it's far too late. O-rings can harden over time. As they get hard, they're not quite as supple, so they don't seal perfectly. The lubricants on dynamic O-rings can also harden, which can lead to the O-ring to fray because it's moving backwards and forwards, and it just starts to fray and just starts to let a little bit too much pressure through. And hoses do actually work themselves loose over time and need tightening. Even though you did it up finger tight and then just a little extra squidge, they do eventually just work themselves free. There are many sealing surfaces in your regulator that usually work in perfect harmony, but when one or more of them fail, then too much pressure can end up where it shouldn't be, either in a certain section of your first stage or in a certain hose. Most regulators today are what we call downstream, and it's one reason why they free flow. Your second stage, the bit that goes in your mouth, acts as an overpressure valve. So if the pressure in the hose gets too high, then the valve in your second stage just vents off any excess pressure. It's basically an overpressure valve. It's not always loud and as exciting as a free flow. Sometimes it's just a very gentle hiss because it's just allowing just anything that goes over a certain pressure, it just lets that off and just purges that. And in a lot of cases, you probably won't notice because you'll breathe far more volume than the leak will actually produce in a single breathing cycle. The problem comes in that small leaks often become big leaks, and that little leak is your best warning sign before something goes very wrong. And if you can't see it or you can't feel it, how are you going to notice a small leak before you jump in the water and risk it becoming a big leak? The positive pressure test is very easy to run, and you have all of the diagnostic tools that you need. The procedure is to set up your regulator to a cylinder as you normally would, ideally in the exact way that you'll be diving them, connected to your BCD, connected to your dry suit and everything, so it's as if you're just about to jump in. Pressurize your regulators by opening the cylinder valve gently, and then open the valve all the way as normal. Check your pressure gauge on your submersible pressure gauge. Now close the cylinder valve, but don't touch anything else. You want to leave your regulators fully pressurized. The next thing to do is wait. The longer the better, but 5-10 minutes should be enough. If you've got even longer, perfect. But if you come back to your regulators after 20 minutes, however long you've had, and the needle on your SPG hasn't moved, or the number on your computer hasn't changed from your transmitter, then you're all good. Your regulators are in top condition and they're holding their pressure. If the needle drops by a small amount, then you have yourself a small leak. I probably wouldn't worry too much, but I would be looking for a leak just out of curiosity. A few bar, under 10 bar, and I probably wouldn't cancel the dive, but I'd be conscious about it. I probably wouldn't stray too far from my buddy or go anywhere too risky. But if the drop is in like the double digits, then yeah, I'd definitely be taking a much closer look at my regulators and ideally getting them serviced before my next dive, because there's a leak in there somewhere and I don't exactly know what it is yet. Now, if your regulators have completely depressurized, you either have a catastrophic failure, which you probably would have heard. Maybe the boat is rocking a bit too much and it's pushed the purge button, or maybe an overzealous crew member who thinks that you've maybe forgotten to purge your regulators and for whatever reason they're touching your dive equipment without you present. Either way, you need to find out which. Finding the exact cause of what's leaking can be quite tricky, but finding where the gas is leaking out of your regulator can be quite easy. If it's a substantial leak, you'll probably be able to hear it. Open up the cylinder valve so that you're repressurizing your regulators and pop each second stage to your ear, probably not too close. Hear it from a distance first before you just jam that mouthpiece into your ear, and just listen for a hiss. If it's a gentle leak, you'll hear it hissing. If you can't hear anything, then leak test spray is your friend. There are commercial sprays available, but soapy water in a spray bottle works just fine. Spray each section where there should be an O-ring, and any leaks will just bubble and make themselves really obvious. But before that, you can always just go around just making sure all the hoses and all the fittings are nice and tight. Once you've found the leak, you might be able to run a field repair. If it is just a loose hose, then you can just nip that up. You can replace Schrader valves in BCD hoses, maybe by tightening your dialer breath in your second stage. That might stem the leak if you can hear it coming from that second stage. But diagnosing the exact cause is best left to a professional technician. Just because you know where the gas is coming from doesn't necessarily mean that that's the faulty O-ring. It could be further upstream. I usually run a positive pressure test on my regulators a few days before a diving trip. It only takes half an hour, and it's the best time to find a leak, when you have plenty of time to fix it. And I'll also typically run it before each dive when I'm setting up my equipment. Set up your BCD onto your cylinder, set up your regulators, and run the positive pressure test. I'll set my kit up as early as possible, pressurize those regulators, making sure that I have plenty of gas in the cylinder, and then close the valve. But I won't purge that regulator like other divers. There's no real reason to purge your regulators. They're designed to hold that kind of pressure. The longer your test is, the more obvious small leaks are going to be, and you have the added benefit of knowing your cylinder pressure as early as possible. Too many times I've switched cylinders only to find that my new cylinder is empty, or it's had a short fill that needs changing, which, if you only do this right before a dive, means that you're now flustered. You're going to have to take your BCD and your regulators off of this duff cylinder, working around everyone else who's already putting stuff on. But if you have the time and the space on the deck, then it's good to do a positive pressure check as early as possible. You can also run a negative pressure check on open circuit regulators. It's not quite as involved as a rebreather, but you're still checking that they're functioning properly. With the valve closed, your regulator still attached on the cylinder, breathe the gas down to 0 and then continue to suck on that second stage. You shouldn't get very far, but if you do manage to draw some gas from somewhere, then there may be a tear in your diaphragm or something blocking the exhaust diaphragm from sealing properly. Try it on your primary second stage and your alternate, your octo. Make sure that they're both working properly. If there are any tears in a second stage diaphragm, it can let water in and just malfunction. You'll get a wet breathe or something else will happen. If it's just debris like sand under an exhaust tee, a wash through the mouthpiece with some just water should be enough to dislodge and clear it. Tears in your second stage diaphragm really needs a good service or replacement parts at least. So the next time that you unpack your dive gear ready for a dive, maybe think about a positive and negative pressure test to make sure that your regulators are working properly. I'd far rather discover a malfunction in my regulators on the surface, surrounded by tools and fresh air, than 20 meters down and surrounded by bubbles and water. Remember to head over to today's sponsor, Master Liverboards, who run beautiful diving trips all around the world, from the Galapagos and the Bahamas to the Red Sea, the Maldives, and all around Southeast Asia, in space and comfort of their world-class Master Liverboard fleet. Head over to masterliverboards.com. I'll pop a link in the description and up here so that you can check them out and dream about your next liverboard adventure. And of course, head over to our website, scubadivermag.com, and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.